I know you're weary. There's a song, the next line is, I know you're playing to include me. There's a song, it's an old country song. All right. Well, it's not old either. It's old. Never mind. We're going to talk about ethics. Business ethics. What are they? It's from the Greek, ethikos. That means of morals. You're going to learn some things in this section that are kind of surprising. And when Dave Mullendorf comes in here next Monday night, he's going to fill in some blanks for you that will actually feed into business, lending, and finance. But this being a Greek name is all well and good. But the Greeks were not the first to have their own code of ethics. Before there was law, before there was organized religion, before there were philosophers, before there was any type of civilization, even before humans could speak, there were clans and tribes of us out there struggling with the members of their families just to survive. What did they do? How did they survive? They developed rituals that provided for the distribution and redistribution of resources among the various members of the clan or the tribe or the group. This made sure that each member of the tribe or the clan or the group had what they needed. Having said that, I have a question for you. What happens if someone did not receive what they needed to survive and they were a productive member of that group? Julia?
They will start to perform less than was expected.
They would perform at a lower than expected level. And if they knew about that and they knew what the cause was,
They
would not.
the item, or they'll get what they need to perform better.
That would be redistributed so that they would be able to perform at their peak level. Even distribution of goods was good for the group. Those that took more than they needed were deemed not to be good people in the group. Those that injured the members of the clan, providing for the needs of the clan, were ostracized or much, much worse. So if they were hunters, if anyone injured one of their hunters in a dispute, particularly over resources, they could be ostracized or exiled from the group or the clan, or much worse. If they were gatherers and someone stole someone else's basket of grain that they had gathered that day, they could be ostracized from the group. We then had what we call unspoken mores. It's a Latin word which we have extended to be morals. We all have moral principles. The law developed in the oral traditions first of ancient cultures independently, based on the needs of that group or that civilization or that culture. For example, the Brehon. The Brehon was a body of law developed in Neolithic or Stone Age Ireland by its earliest clans and groups. Those are the people from which I descended. An example of the Brehon law was that if a traveler knocked on the door of a home in the middle of the night It was not tradition only, but law that required that the inhabitants of that village, that house, provide for that traveler, whether they knew them or not, in such a way that their life was preserved, so that they would be warm, they would be fed, and they had a place to sleep until they departed again the next day. That was Brehon law. Will you find that written anywhere? No. It was not written anywhere. It was passed down by special lawgivers known as druids and bards. Bards were poets and singers who made poems about the law, who sang about the law, and the druids were like the justices of the peace. There were examples of ancient tribes that showed ethics and philosophy as we know it. But most of what we know and understand developed in the cities and schools of the ancient Greeks. Socrates. Anyone know anyone else? Plato. Aristotle. A number of them developed ethics as we know it. So, the question is, what are ethics to each one of you? Mecca, you start. What are morals and ethics to you?
Can you give me an example of what answer you're looking for? I feel like that's a hard question.
I want you to, that's exactly why I asked it.
I guess ethics would be treating, well, to me, it's treating others how you would want to be treated.
It's a very good example. And that came from what tradition?
In my personal life, or just like?
No, in ancient tradition.
Eye for an eye,
Can we,
golden rule.
can we say all of them?
Yeah, sure.
Because almost every group, tribe, or clan had some version of the golden rule out there. That's where that Brehon law concept of bringing a stranger into your home and feeding, clothing, and safekeeping them came from. Okay? But where do you often find examples in your own life of ethics? How do they develop around you? Pardon? Who you grow up around.
Also like
Common sense, culture, family,
Religion?
school, religion,
Country.
country, everything that we have. Yeah. Wealth. Ethics and morals all develop based on all of these things from what we know or how we have developed. And we internalize them, don't we? So ethics are principles of morality. It's an ancient study, and it deals with interaction and trade-offs between personal goals and the good of others. When we talk about wealth, how many societies have tried to foster wealth for the sake of wealth itself? A lot of them, right? What usually happens to those civilizations? They usually fall, don't they? They gather wealth. Ancient Rome was an example I was going to use. You're thinking of the Ming Dynasty in China, or the Han Dynasty in China. They could.
What about like the fall of Constantinople?
The fall of Constantinople, the fall of the Persian Empire. And it wasn't just because they were wealthy or they were attempting to gather more wealth, they were arrogant about it, were they not? So ethics and morals go hand in hand with personal attitude, or the attitude of the country, or the attitude of the people. That's why we say they're trade-offs between personal goals and the good of others. If we're interested in the good of others, we follow the golden rule. We give to others. Ethics relates to fairness, justice, rightness, or wrongness of action and consequences. Fairness. Is fairness the same as justness?
In a sense.
No, tell me why you think they're not the same.
Because like, it could be just, not fair.
But not fair. If I took a basket of grain from one family and gave it to another family, when this family had done nothing to earn that basket of grain or to provide for themselves and the rest of the group, would that be just? No. But the survival of the group needed it, so would it be fair? Yes. And so it seems that we're talking about two positions that are juxtaposed. In some cases, ethics can be considered resistance to conformity in society. Where do we find expressions of ethics that we see as being resistance to conformity? Where do we see it every day?
Even like, I guess, a school setting.
A school setting.
Because like practicing ethics, you could like not cheat or take the easy way out of certain things. But you can conform to society which is doing it around you.
Yes, that's correct. That's a very good example, Zach. What else? Where I'm thinking of certain specific individuals that are well known for their resistance to conformity, that act as the conscience of our society. These are people that sometimes those in power like to suppress.
Police officers.
Police officers, sometimes.
The president.
The president, sometimes.
Activists.
Activists. These are all good answers. But I personally have always considered poets, writers, and musicians to be the conscience of our country. And when I see a poet who makes an impact on me, I may not like what they say, but I have to say, from their point of view, that may be absolutely correct. And I have to change the way I think about something. Music. Music is a wonderful conveyance for ethics and morality. And you think about all of the rap artists we have out there that are poets. They set their poetry to a beat. Back in the 40s and 50s, we used to call these people beatniks. And they were confined to an area in New York City on the Lower East Side. And they had their own set of clubs. And they would do very much the same thing. And some of them were very strange, but they were very interesting. You all listen to rap, right? I'm not the only one in here who listens to rap, right? Okay. I thought I'd lost every single one of you there for a minute.
Do you listen to rap?
Yes, I listen to rap.
Rap.
I like all of them. Because they all have a message. They all have a message. Now, I like 50 Cent. I like Jay-Z. I like a lot of different musicians and rappers.
What about Indian rule?
Oh, no.
Okay.
I have not heard much.
You don't like English, it's okay.
He's irrelevant.
Yes, I've heard some.
Some little baby?
Yeah.
I love
Oh,
it.
Would anyone like to get up and do some? I'm sure the audience that we're recording would be very appreciative.
You said play some little baby?
Never mind. Let's keep going. So, can the lines blur between ethics and law? And the answer is yes. Lines can blur. How many of you, anybody in here married beside myself? Why are you looking like, no, you? It involves a boy, no, you.
Oh, this was
No, I did not.
Okay, let's look at marriage vows and the marriage ceremony. The marriage ceremony has marital parties exchanging vows. They can be traditional or self-authored. Where are they written in statute or in common law? They aren't. Why are they considered to be so lawful that you have to go to court to break it? You're saying them and then you sign a marriage certificate, which makes it a contract. Some contracts are harder to break than laws. Nowhere on that marriage certificate do we write in the vows that were stated by the couple in front of the state's witness. And that state's witness can be a judge, it can be the clerk of courts, it can be a priest, it can be a rabbi, it can be an imam, it can be anyone that's registered with the state to witness ceremonies. And he doesn't perform them. The people that perform the ceremony are the bride and the groom themselves. Yes, sir?
So with that being said, can you be married without signing a legal contract?
You cannot be married under the laws of the state without signing the marriage certificate. There is no longer anything called common law marriage. It was done away by state law in all 50 states 20 years ago. So some people say, well, we've been together, living together for 7 years, and we've been representing each other as husband and wife. Sorry, don't count. Don't count. You know, you got to put a ring on it. Who went soprano on me there? But these vows exist in what we call moral imperatives and social contract within the institution of marriage itself. The courts accept it as law, and they parallel principles of the common law in contract, which we'll discuss at such length that you will want to walk out. It gets so dry when we talk about contracts. But it's very important because in business you got nothing but contracts. So what is the difference between a moral imperative and a social contract? So let's see what I have back here. We talk about business ethics and social responsibility. So we have an ethical dilemma. Sometimes when we have some sort of problem, we want to know what a firm should do for which no clear, right decision is available. Well, that's a dilemma. Social responsibility of business, the community expects businesses to do certain things. They expect them to be good citizens. They expect them to participate with the citizens in helping, say, their children go to school, or provide for school supplies, or help with fans for the elderly in the summer when it's really hot. Just all sorts of things like that. But I was going to get into the ethics of duties, the moral imperatives, and the social contracts. Moral imperatives are ethical duties that are implied by our roles in the family, society, and religion. So, using myself as an example, I am a dad. Should surprise none of you. I tell dad jokes. The only way to know dad jokes is to have been a really unfunny dad. My duties are to provide for my family and my spouse, to feed, clothe, and shelter them, to keep them safe, to keep them from harm, never to harm them myself, and provide for education, medical care, welfare, and the best that I can under those circumstances. Those are my moral imperatives. Okay? So here's the thing with a moral imperative. Moral imperatives, when they're not carried out properly, are almost always punishable by law. What happens when a parent leaves their child in a hot car?
They get charged.
They get charged. They get charged with bringing harm to that child, do they not? They can be charged for harming that child. What happens when, what happens, I was trying to block your way, just to be ornery. What happens when an adult, someone over the age of 18, gives a minor a beer? They're charged with contributing to the delinquency of a minor. That's not law, for heaven's sakes. That is a moral imperative that the law picks up as a duty of the position of that individual who is of the more mature aspect. A parent who exposes their child to harm, or harm comes to that child by the negligence of the parent, can serve a very long and difficult jail sentence. The most important one that we have had recently is the one where parents leave a firearm unlocked, where a child can get a hold of it. They think the child isn't going to know, so they hide it under the mattress. Where's the first place that a kid's going to look? Under the mattress.
I never looked at the
I'll bet your parents were really successful at hiding all your Christmas gifts, too.
No.
We've got an admission here. Call her mom. She knows where all of her Christmas presents are. But that is one of the things we have to be aware of. That at some point, everything we do ethically and morally may have legal consequences. The other part of this is social contract. Social contract are ethical duties that are implied by our membership in faith-based or charitable organizations, or by working for organizations dedicated to some common good. They don't give us anything monetary in return, but they do give us some spiritual, emotional, or psychological compensation, say by honors or awards.
It's like tithe and offering.
Like what?
Like tithes in church.
Yeah, it's like tithes in church. Yeah, you give the church money for giving you solace, comfort, and guidance. That's where the money goes. And a new Cadillac out back. So, yeah. So anyway, we belong to certain organizations. I belong to the Boy Scouts of America. Yeah, I do.
I'll tell you about the city, Star St. Office.
Yeah. That's the Arrowhead Honor Award. Which one? Well, I'm talking about the Boy Scouts. You guys want to come in and see my office, you're more than welcome to come in anytime you want. But I am a member of the Boy Scouts of America. I have been a member of the Boy Scouts of America for 42 years. I am the oldest kid in this room. I like the two things that kids like the most: fire and knives. That's what Boy Scouts like the most: fire and knives. And that's the thing that you have to keep them away from the most. You have to take the knife away and give them a proper training course, and you have to keep them from starting their own campfires. You let the older scouts do that. And you have to make sure that they don't put their tents within 30 feet of the fire ring. There's one kid that put his tent right next to the fire ring. What are you doing? You're going to burn yourself out of house and home, literally. So a social contract, and I had a lot of responsibility with that organization. I still do, because I'm still with them. I'm in an emeritus kind of situation now as one of the older, forget I said that, as one of the most experienced scouts in the council. So what I end up doing is receiving a feeling of welfare that I receive from the boys. That they get good training, and now we have girls in there too. We have girls, and they're not going to sell cookies. Those are the Girl Scouts. So the Girl Scouts are Girl Scouts. The Boy Scouts are the Boy Scouts. But we have girls in the Cub Scouts now. And they get to do all the good stuff that they've seen their brothers do. Mm-hmm. They wear the neckerchief, they got the uniform, they race the Pinewood Derby cars, they go out on hikes. So, yeah. Can boys be Girl Scouts? No, they cannot.
But I want to still want to
So what do I receive from the Boy Scouts? Well, occasionally, after I've been there so many years, I've done certain activities so many times, or been able to work with the adults and the children and all that sort of thing, I would get a little knot. It's a colorful knot that I wear on my uniform for whatever activity it was.
You still have one?
Do I wear short? Boy Scout shorts? Yes, I do. And I'll bet I have better legs than any of the guys in here.
That may be true.
That's really but just so you know, before you challenge me, I run 6.5 to 8 miles a day. Even Saturday and Sunday. A day. It's for my health. What time do I go to sleep? I'm asleep now. You just can't tell, Sheree. I'm the walking dead.
That's a regular joke. That was funny. I feel like you should laugh at that.
Thank you, Sam. That is probably my sole departure from dad jokes for the entire semester. Well, you asked Sheree, you should have known some of it was coming. So the difference between a moral imperative and a social contract is that they're not actual contracts. They just exist because we say they do. The things that happen under law happen because we say they're bad. If we wanted to change it and stop doing it, we could. But we want to safeguard the population. We want good things to happen to people, not bad things to happen to people. You know? So, that's why we have them, and that's why we enforce them. Now, a contract in law is a formal agreement, on the other hand. Unlike moral imperatives and social contracts, a legal contract is a formal agreement which we will study, and it's meant to enforce promises between two parties or sets of parties that will grant compensation to a defaulting party if they do not fulfill or complete the contract. Now, married couples do take their contract, which is a social contract, to court. Why is this? Because when they sign the document and they say the vows, they have an oral contract which is specific in its terms. Where are the specific terms? In the vows that everybody heard. So that's where the difference is between a social contract and a written contract, or an oral contract that carries out things between parties. A marriage is still an oral contract, and it's enforceable in a court of law. It is, anybody, I don't know if anybody's witnessed any divorce proceedings or been through it with their parents or anything. I feel very, very sad. And I started out doing a lot of family law years ago, and it was very painful for me personally to see a family disintegrate. It's like death. It's like death. The grieving process is very similar. Just take my word for it. I hope you never have to experience it. So, here's an ethical dilemma, known as ethical dilemma number 1. For those of you studying Spanish, it's uno. For those of you studying French, it's un. Still means 1. I said it wrong, didn't I? So, what is the best source for ethics in a business practice? Is it the individual employee or the business organization itself? To what extent should individual employees be allowed to lend input in the creation of a code of ethics for a business organization? In the event that an individual employee's ethical standards differ from his or her employer's code of ethics, what can or should be done to resolve those differences? Let's start with the first question first. What is the best source for ethical business practices? Is it the employee or the business? We have business up here. Business? Both. Okay. Who makes up the ethical? You think it's the employee? Who makes up the code of ethics for each individual business? Yes, that's very right. The business owners. The business owners make it up. In the case of a corporation, the business owners are the board of directors empowered by the stockholders, right? So they make it. Anybody here had human resources yet here? I hope that you were taught when you get into human resources what I taught my students when I was teaching human resources, is that there's always two ways to look at things inside of a business. The insider and the outsider version. The outsider version says that the employees should be polled in order to make sure that the ethical conduct is correct for a business. Because that is their moral imperative and social contract with the community. But the business owners who are responsible for the success or failure of that business end up setting up a code of operation and a code of ethics for the employees and for themselves so that the business will be successful and profitable. Profitable. So, the two things that it involves when making up a code of ethics for a business organization are the corporate culture, what that business does, where they do it, how it operates, etc. And the will of the stockholders as expressed by the directors, or if it is a partnership by the partners, if it is a sole proprietorship by the owners who run the business. Okay? How are we doing? We're doing great. Our time says we have an hour left, but we won't need it. We won't need it. I'm stopping after ethics. Well, we won't cover all of them. I don't think it won't be necessary. We'll see. So success and ethics. How do we achieve success in our world? Well, we can conform to society or we cannot conform to society. If we conform to society, we're doing exactly what society wants and we can become important and profitable. If we resist society and say, no, we're not going to play your game, what happens? Society has to end up conforming to us, and then they follow our model and we become successful by our model.
When?
So, we all have something that we have, but call it by a different name sometimes, that help us change ourselves, our companies, our country. What do we have but call it by different names? Sometimes we see pictures and cartoons of this little figure that sits on our shoulder, one on one shoulder and one on the other. And together, these make up something, a conscience. Good, Zach. We all have a conscience that tells us what is right and what is wrong. Again, remember, all consciences are made up of an individual who has shades of light and dark in their personality. The nature of business ethics, well, business ethics focuses on ethical behavior in the mainstream of business. So we look at duty-based ethics and outcome-based ethics. Duty-based ethics are religiously based. Outcome-based ethics are based in economics. The ethical, well, we already did this one, didn't we? So let's talk about Kantian philosophy and religion. Religion gives us a certain outlook at our conscience and at our ethics, and it's based on what we receive from our religion. There are many religions. There are many religions here in Nashville. Many of us have a different outlook on the religion to which we adhere. That also gives us a different outlook. So our ethics are often based on the religion we learned and the religion that we have crafted and molded for ourselves, within ourselves, and we practice. And Kantian philosophy. And Kantian philosophy is very interesting. It's based on economics. It's called utilitarianism. Utilitarianism was developed by an economist named Jeremy Bentham and advanced by his buddy John Stuart Mills. It focuses on the consequences of actions, not the actual nature of the action itself. So what they're saying is, in a word, or sentence is the greatest good for the greatest number of people? Do we do the best for the one, or do we think of the best for the many? That's utilitarianism. And then we look at the process of ethical decision making. Who are our stakeholders? In business, we look at the consumers, we look at the owners or investors, we look at our management, our employees, our community, and then future generations as well. These are all stakeholders. This is the process of ethical decision making that goes all the way through all of the people that we work with and who depend upon us. Our purpose. We all want freedom, we all want security, we all want justice, and we all want efficiency. Now, is this personal or is this business?
Personal. Well, also business.
And business, both. It is. So, to act without restriction from rules imposed by others is our freedom. To possess the capacity or resources to act the way we want, that is also freedom, both personal and business. To escape the cares and demands of the world entirely would be great, but we can't do it. That would be total freedom. Do any of us have total freedom?
You did.
Sadly, we don't. Security, we want to possess enough supply of goods and services to meet basic needs. My personal philosophy is, when you have enough, that's enough. Anything extra can be distributed to charity or to whoever you want to give it to. To be safe from those who wish to interfere with property rights is security as well. To achieve the psychological condition of self-confidence to such an extent that risks are actually welcome. Because if there's a risk, you can handle it, maybe it's worth taking. Justice. Well, first of all, we want to receive what we work for. That is justice. To treat all humans identically, regardless of race, class, gender, age, and sexual preferences. That's also justice, both business and personal. To provide resources in proportion to need. Something that doesn't always happen. And to possess anything that someone else is willing to grant us. We talk about gifts. That is something that someone's willing to grant us. We can take that and possess that, and that would be justice. Especially if we've been injured in the process and it comes as a result of a court case. Efficiency. To maximize wealth in society, to get the most from some output, and to minimize cost. Decision making. Well, what do we have to do first? If we're in a business or a corporation, we have to have public disclosure. Sometimes ethics says in order for you to function so that other people will trust you, you need to tell the public what you've been involved with. Transparency of process. We hear that catchphrase all the time. What does it actually mean? It doesn't mean that we just don't try and hide what we're doing. Isn't it as simple as that? Universalization. Universalization is that we try and do everything for everyone the same way at possibly the same time. And then, as we have spoken previously, the golden rule. Do unto others as you would have them do unto you. But we always find that there are going to be trade-offs. Is it legal? Is it ethical? And is it profitable? And here's an example. A few years ago, there was a company that made baby formula up in Columbus, Ohio, it's my hometown. And they were shipping it around the United States. And at that time, it was legal, it was very profitable because of certain advertising they were doing that said, oh, this is better than breastfeeding your baby. It's better than mother's milk. And it was legal then. Suddenly, research started to come out that said, you're not even close to being nutritious. Not nearly what this child needs. And they passed a law that said you may not market anything that is untrue about this formula. That was it. The formula had to be then marketed as, yes, it's a great substitute when the mother is not available or unable to feed. So it was no longer ethical, was it? Was it still profitable? Actually, it was. So now it wasn't legal. They changed their ethics to conform to the will of society, and that made it still profitable. Now, let's take that same baby formula and ship it to South America, where there are no regulations like was put on them here in the United States. What do you suppose happened? Was it profitable? Wildly, because the cost of health care in South America is so prohibitive that young mothers with children can't afford it. They can't get good health care. They don't know about breastfeeding their babies. So, was it profitable? Oh my gosh, yeah. Was it profitable? Was it legal? Yes. Was it ethical? No. Because they had already been told in the United States that it was not. So they made trade-offs to increase profits based on a lack of ethics. I'm not sure how it ever came out. I don't know if the countries in South America actually legalized the formula or made them stop selling the formula or what they had to do, but I can find out easy enough. Okay? But there are always, in every business, going to be trade-offs. There are always going to be ethical issues in employment relationships. What is one of the big ethical issues in employment relationships now, these days? Sexual harassment, interpersonal relationships between coworkers. That is a big employment relationship ethical issue right now. That is not going to be settled. It's going to be kicked around a long time before there's a generation that is raised up from youth to understand and know what's going on, what they're supposed to do, what they're not supposed to do, and how they're supposed to act, all of that sort of thing. Consumer welfare. Do we have ethical issues in consumer welfare? What is an issue in consumer welfare right now?
If you actually need it.
Pardon me?
If you actually need it.
If you actually need what? Here's one that has been in the news a lot the last year or two, is how much food do we test, and how can we do it if the Food and Drug Administration testing facilities are consistently cut back and there are no inspectors to go out and inspect chicken farms, vegetable farms? Do we wait until we go out, and do we hire the people we need to test the produce and the meat to make sure it's okay? there's a consumer welfare question that's been around for the last couple of years, big time. Spinach. All of the bacteria in the spinach and that sort of thing, coliform bacteria. In the middle of changing ethical landscapes, we have national and international trade issues. Internationally, the United States used to participate in bribing countries so they could do business overseas. We don't do that anymore. We have federal laws that prevent that. Now, am I smart enough to know that it probably still goes on at higher levels? Yeah. But it's just hidden better. But when we find it, we prosecute it. It's just right now, all the staff has been taken away from those units that used to prosecute it in the Department of Justice. Each profession has its own set of ethics. A lawyer, we have ethics codes. We have the canons of ethics and the rules of practice. The rules of practice say you can do this, you can do that. Canons of ethics say, well, you've got your rule of practice here, let me tell you why. And that's the canon of ethics for that particular segment of practice. Medical ethics is a big, big thing now. Medical ethics, of course, we've always known, we have a problem with a certain person. We're not sure whether we should let them live or continue to give them medical care or not. And the family is nowhere to be found. What do we do? So we have committees in hospitals that get together. Doctors, nurses, and staff get together and look at this. For those of you that are interested in ethics and compliance with rules and regulations, in any kind of business, there is a career that businesses, hospitals, all sorts of people are really hungry for, and that is people with human resources experience and ethics. Risk compliance is what they generally call it, risk compliance. So if you're interested in that, there's a demand for it right now. And then, of course, we have accounting ethics, which we all know accountants have to have a certain set of ethics in order to work with their clients consistently, just like attorneys do. But would you be surprised to know that librarians have a code of ethics? I see some eyebrows going up. Would you be surprised? Why not? I'm telling you it's true. Now you tell me why they have it.
Well, I don't know. I'm not sure for librarians, but like any job where you're coming into contact with other people, there has to be some type of law, ethics.
Well, okay. Go ahead.
Libraries are such a broad area of different books and stuff. They might not agree with a certain book and try and just hide it from other people, but those people can still see it, or should still be able to see it. So they have to learn ethics.
You have the basic premise right, but here's how it happened. Here's how it came about. We used to do a certain, now illegal, tactic in law enforcement that was called what? Profiling. Now, if I go into the local library and say, I know somebody, and I'm a law enforcement officer, I'm not allowed to profile them, but I know they have a library card here and they read voraciously. I say, I want their book list. Do you think I could determine what some of their potential activities are?
So it's like a HIPAA violation, you can turn over the list of what someone.
That's right. But there is no HIPAA for librarians. Just ethics. And that's why librarians have a very strict code of ethics between and amongst themselves, so that they cannot disclose the list of readings or movies or items that have been accessed on library computers to anyone without a warrant or without a subpoena. And that is very difficult to get against the library. Okay. MIS professionals, computers, are the same problem, okay? Same thing. Now I want to tell you about the X method. This is something that I came up with. This is my own personal little guidebook called X, EPPS, and it stands for exactly what I'm going to talk to you about. First thing is ethics. Ethics overtakes large segments of the population. When judges and legislators view the community and inventory mores, the community, they will incorporate the ethical views of the community into their own lives and their own views. So we start off with ethics. They internalize the ethics of the community. The next thing they do, they start issuing public policies. Public policies, after the judiciary and legislators internalize ethics of the electorate they serve, they begin to make statements that reflect those views. And if you ever hear politicians or legislators or anybody serving in office get up, they will say, we don't believe this should be public policy. That tells you it's not law, but it does tell you that people are internalizing values that the community holds. So it started with ethics. Now it's gone to public policy. After public policy, it's going to find its way into some court case somewhere. Probably in that same jurisdiction where the public policy was made. So now we have precedent. And what happens with precedents? Precedents become the local common law, do they not? That fill in the chinks in the wall between statutes and ethics. Then finally we have statutes. EPPS. Ethics, policy, precedent, and statutes. If you use this analysis model, you can analyze anything that you encounter here at Fisk, from sociology, to political science, to business cases, even to mathematics and physics. Okay? This set of slides will be up on cams tomorrow. So it comes down to, are we using our best judgment? Especially as a business. If we're using it for the best judgment of our shareholders, our employees, and our community, we are ethical. And we have what we call the business judgment rule, which is actually a rule in corporate law which says if we've done the best we can, that's good enough. And that can be judged by a court. So, 100 years from now, will any of our businesses be a hero or a hindrance to society? Ethics, and using guidance that we find in our ethical behavior, can give us a clue as to how things are going to go based on what we've been doing in the past and what we're doing now. And we are done for the evening. Thank you for enrolling in the class. We will have Bob Mullendor here next Monday, and he will take on a great deal of the
I'm glad it's Monday.